My name's Doug Lisle. I'm a psychologist. Wasn't my first choice. I wanted to be an artist and should have been an artist, but my father refused to give me the emotional support, or more importantly, the financial support that my talent so richly deserved. History will judge him. As much as I'd like to process my issues about that this morning, which believe me I would, we'd be here all morning. That's not what I'm here to do. What I'm here to do is talk about this psychology thing. And what we're going to try to do today is try to uncover some answers to a mystery. And that mystery is, if you were motivated enough, and you were sharp enough, and you were lucky enough, and at an important time of your life you heard a T. Colin Campbell, a Baxter Montgomery, a Dr. Terry Mason, a Dean Ornish, if you had heard a John McDougall, if you had heard some of the people that have spent their lives figuring out this information and figuring out what direction that we need to go, and you knew what the right direction was to go, why is it so hard to go there? That's what we're going to be trying to figure out today. So I'm going to use some charts and graphs and scientific principles, but mostly I'm going to be using my artistic skills to help bring this home. So we're going to begin by asking and trying to answer the greatest philosophical question of all time. Everybody knows what this is, of course. Of course, it's a shark, man. That was never in doubt. This is a great white. You can tell by the distinctive markings. And our great philosophical question is, why does a shark have teeth? Has teeth to eat. Okay? Well, why does a shark eat? In order to survive. So a shark has teeth to eat, and it eats in order to survive. Now, one of the things that you wouldn't know that in psychology school, they don't really teach you anything. You wouldn't know that. But what they do is at the end, if you're really a nice person, and you keep being a nice person, and you keep being a nice person, i.e. you kiss up to the professors, if you do this long enough, then eventually, right before they let you out, they finally teach you a secret. One secret they know, which is that just by looking at people, you can tell what they're thinking, which is a pretty good secret to know. So it so happens that I'm looking at this lady right here in front, and I can tell what she's thinking. No, don't turn around, it's you. She's thinking with information this insightful coming out this early in the talk, she's glad she got the seat right here in front. Yeah, sharks have teeth to eat, and they eat in order to survive. So the question is, what's the point of their survival? What are they doing here? Eating. Something that they're up to. They're here to reproduce, which is exactly what Dr. Mason showed us this morning. He says, you know, we made a sport of this whole thing, but the truth is that we're here to actually reproduce. So we see here that a reproducing shark is a happy shark, you see? See how that goes? Now, these little guys here, are they the same? Are they exact copies of the big guy? Not quite. How come? Because it takes two, right? So what's really being copied here are the genes. And so what the genes are is they're like playing cards in the deck of life. And your mom has one deck, and your dad has one deck, and you mix them together, and then you get your own deck. And your deck is a mix of those two, so it's not exactly like either one of them. But the little genes themselves are exact copies. They're just the playing cards that come over and over. And if any of you are card players, you know that if you play a card game long enough, sooner or later you're going to get exactly the same hand. But that's only because there's 52 cards. The genes that built you, there's 30,000 of them. So there'll never be anything like you again. You're unique. You're little bits of a bunch of people that came before you, but you're a unique combination, like a unique hand. And our job is to sort of play that hand as well as we can, and to try to live this life well. And what we're doing here the underlying purpose biologically is this thing that we call the cycle of life, the survival and reproductive mechanisms. I actually don't know who set this up or why or where. I leave questions of ultimate origins to theologians, to philosophers. I only know how it's set up, and how it's set up is as a gene process, where the genes are driving a whole set of sequences that involve survival and reproduction as motivations for why this thing does what it does. So that's why it does. Now, how does a shark know when it is to do these things? So how does it know when to eat? And when it's hungry, it's not real complicated. And so it's going to turn out that there's a set of mechanisms inside of it that we're going to call instincts that sort of tell this thing what to do. It's messages from inside. These are like shadows of forgotten ancestors that passed on this message in a way so that this thing can translate these impulses to know what it needs to do. And so these instincts are located in the brain. And what they actually are is they're neural circuits. They're literally electrical circuits that work very much like electronic equipment. So when there's energy put into an electronic equipment, whether it's a stereo system or a TV, then it sort of does what it is that that thing does. And the same thing is true with the instincts of the mind. That if this shark sees some energy that comes from the sun, and it glances off a tuna fish that's in the water, say 40 feet away, that energy that comes off, glancing off of that tuna fish, comes in a particular pattern. And that pattern then goes right into the eyeball of the shark, and it matches up an ancient library that was created and designed inside of that shark to say, that's what you eat. So it motivates stalking behavior, okay? So it's literally energy from the sun, hits some energy on, hits this entity, which in self is matter and has energy for the shark, and that thing translates through the neural circuits into us now observing behavior that we're going to call shark nature. So sharks have their own library because it's a shark. A camel has its own library because it has camel nature, and human beings have human nature. And human nature is what is that makes us different from everything else in the world. But despite the different kinds of natures that each kind of creature has, they all have the same basic fundamental motivational system. There's been a way that this thing has been designed, and in every creature, you're going to see the same things. Three things that creatures seek when they go about their business. The first thing is that they pursue pleasure. And it's going to be there's two primary pleasures that creatures seek. Anybody want to guess what those things might be? Food and sex, okay? Food is the #1 survival problem of the organism. Sex is the #1 reproduction problem of the organism. So this thing must be motivated for food and sex, and its entire design is formulated around these two targets. So this thing's swimming through the water with basically a neon sign flashing in its head that says food, sex, food, sex, food, sex. Unless it's a male, then it says sex, food, sex. It's pretty much the same thing. So this thing doesn't just pursue pleasure, but pleasure is the main signaling device that tells the creature that it has hit a target that is going to be useful for increasing its either survival odds or its reproduction odds. And so that's how nature tells it how it is to go about its business of living. But it does that also trying to avoid pain. So if it has all kinds of other specialized circuits that tell it that certain kinds of environmental inputs are going to decrease its likelihood of survival. Okay, so if it's a little too cold, it'll move to where it's warmer. If it's a little too warm, it'll move to where it's cooler. If the water's a little too dirty, it'll move to where it's cleaner. If it bumps against a shark rock, it'll avoid that area of the water. So this thing is constantly being pushed and pulled around by pain impulses that also tell it to make sure that you stay out of trouble so that you can maintain the integrity of the system. Pain is sort of a device that tells you that the integrity of the system is being threatened. So those two motivational systems have been talked about for thousands of years. We go back into Scripture, we'll find those. We go into the philosophers, we'll find them talking about pleasure-seeking and pain avoidance as motivational systems. But it turns out there's a third, very critical fundamental of how motivation works. And it's obvious about this that we needed to add it to these two in order to understand why creatures do what they do. Now, if there's a tuna flopping in the water 40 feet away and another one flopping away 20 feet away, which one does this guy go for? 20. Why? Easier. Let's be a little more formal. Less energy. So what this thing is doing is it's just like a business. It wants to make the same profits, but it wants to spend less money. Okay? It's just sort of in the gene business, so it's trying to be more efficient. And so what it does is it's here to conserve energy. So what you're going to find is throughout the natural world, you're going to see creatures are designed with neural circuits and behavioral impulses to make sure it is that they get to those targets, food and sex, and avoiding predators, avoiding pain, avoiding all the problems that there are of life. It's going to try to do those things as efficiently as possible. That's why you're going to see predators are going to go after the weak, the sick, the slow, the isolated, and the injured. They do that automatically. They don't have to be taught that. They just know if that thing stumbles, go for that one. Okay? Go for the closer one, all things being equal. This is also why fish will swim in school, because when they're swimming, they're actually drafting on each other, just like race car drivers do now in our modern races, trying to draft to save a little bit of gasoline. Well, the fish are trying to save a little bit of energy as they draft on each other. Same thing with Canadian geese when they're migrating in that characteristic V pattern in the sky. They're doing that also, saving a precious little bit of energy in their migration. Well, actually, my mother tells me, don't tell people this, but there's one other reason why the geese fly in that pattern. She says they don't need to know this, but I like to be thorough. If they fly in that pattern when they poop, they don't poop in each other's face. It's just a little detail. Now you know, okay. Now, the thing is that these three are like the fundamentals or the pillars of why creatures do what they do. But there needs to be more to life than this. Even though if we went inside the head of the white shark, that's about what we would see. So if it would see a shark of the opposite sex, it would feel attraction. If it sees food, it would feel attraction. They actually have a predator. Anybody know what eats these guys?
No.
Killer whales. We didn't know that. It was like a kid's game, you know, alien versus predator, like who's the biggest of the mountain. We didn't know until some scientists off the coast of California in the 1990s actually studied this and found out that these guys have one natural predator that they fear. They fear killer whales. Killer whales are the biggest, baddest one on the block. But these guys we know what they are. They're pretty tough. But there needs to be more to life if we're going to understand people. If we're going to understand what we're about. We're going to need to know a little bit more, because these guys are actually, even though they're huge and magnificent, they're simple. But things get a little bit more complicated. So everybody knows what this is, of course. Ma'am, that's not a pacifier. Now, is this helpful now? Of course it's a bird, ma'am. That was never in doubt. This is a gray shrike. This is a proud bird of prey, the Mideastern desert. This one's a male. You can tell by the distinctive markings. Now, what this guy does all spring long is he kills bugs and he pokes them on thorns inside of his territory. If you go into a gray shrike's territory, a male gray shrike's territory, it looks like a really sick Christmas tree. You know, it's just like all these little dead things hanging from it. Anybody want to guess why he does this? So mark his territory. That is actually one of the reasons. It's not the primary reason. It's his pantry. Very, very good guess. In other words, it is in fact true. It's partly storage, it's partly marking, but that's not the core. Attractive female. The gold digger right here has got this figured out. Yes, this is to attract a mate, because it's going to turn out, let's see what this slide, oh yeah, so that's the great question. And then here the artist is winking at you just in case you needed a cue. Yes, what happens is that after this guy works hard all spring long, the females then go through a migration and they come into the territories after all this hard work's done. And then they fly around the little territories and see which guys have the most stuff in their tree, and then they mate with the guys with the most stuff in their tree. What a shock this is. This actually helped us explain a really puzzling question in sociology in the Silicon Valley during the first big internet boom in the 1990s, why suddenly there were so many BMWs parked in trees. But it's helped us figure this out. Now, what this guy's after, obviously, is he's after sex. That's why he's doing what he's doing. But he's different than the great white shark. Great white shark sees a potential mate, moves towards it. Very simple impulse, one that we can all understand. But this guy's doing something actually remarkably different. But what he's doing is he's in fact doing something else first in order to get to that other thing. So the path of his life is much more convoluted. So he here is killing bugs and putting them on thorns, and that is a good thing. So his reproductive odds are going up. And then a rainstorm comes maybe and takes all the stuff out of his tree. That's not a good thing. He lost ground. And then he kills a bunch more stuff and puts them on the thorns. That's good. And then a competitor comes and tries to just steal his territory and muscle him out of his territory, which sometimes happens. That's a bad thing. But our guy's tough enough here, so he fights the guy off, he wins, and then he scores, and he gets a mate. All right, so we have a happy ending with this. Now, the question is, how does this work? We know that it's instinct. We know that he's motivated ultimately for pleasure here that's going to take place at mating. But what's different than the great white is the great white simply sees a mate and then moves towards it and hopes for the best. But this guy is doing a bunch of busy work here and working really hard, and this work doesn't seem like it's exactly related to that. It's only indirectly related to it. And so how does nature do it? We know that there's a chemical here during sex and food that is released to tell the creature, this is pleasurable, this is what you should do, this was successful, this increased your odds of either survival or reproduction. That chemical is called dopamine, and it's the unmistakable stamp of biological success. Question is, how are they designed here? Was there a little bit of dopamine for every time this guy killed a little bug and put it on a thorn to remind him of the big dopamine that might be coming? The answer is no. It's really important what the answer is. The answer is that what was created, what was invented, was a completely different psychological experience and a completely different set of neural pathways, literally different neurochemistry. What was invented for more complex creatures are the moods of happiness. What happiness is happiness is a second guidance system. Instead of just pain and pleasure, which works for simple creatures like a lizard, when you start getting things more complicated, like a person, you get emotions, you get moods, you get what we call feelings. And what feelings are, which we didn't know until recently, what they actually are is they are a twin system that's moving alongside, integrated with the pleasure and pain mechanisms to tell you of pleasures and pains to come. So if your mom says, or if your dad says, come here, you're going to get a spanking, okay? That kid is feeling like not feeling good, okay? Because they're anticipating pain. So that's what that system is telling you. Or if a guy's out on a date and he's trying to make some moves and the feedback is not very good, he's finding out that's not very good, that's not a good way to go. Talk about something else and try to get good feedback. So it's going to turn out that we are designed by nature to look for cues to whether or not our behavior is being successful or unsuccessful, and we have mood shifts or emotions that are working as a system along with to anticipate pleasure and pain. For 6,000 years, people have speculated about the nature of happiness. There's been a lot of brilliant insight, a lot of tips. People have had a lot of good home wisdom about how to seek happiness, but they didn't literally know what it is. What it is it's a guidance system. It's a guidance system to tell us whether things are going in the right direction or things are going in the wrong direction. To change direction if they're not good, and to keep going the same direction if they are good. And these are all integrated in with the pleasure-seeking and pain avoidance mechanisms. And that's how this works. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take our little guy here, and we're going to put him in a cage. And we're going to try to learn something when we do this. We've got 2 buttons in this cage. You can't see this one here. That's a red button. It's a magic button, and we've got a blue button right there. And if he hits the blue button, there's a little door that will open, and he gets to fly out into the aviary and start killing bugs and put them on thorns just like he's designed. But if he hits the red button, it's a magic button. If he does that, there's a trap door, and through that trap door there'll be a female that will come all in, ready to rock. Now, men, please don't say anything. This is a good time to keep quiet. Ladies, once he figures out which button to hit, do we think he's going to be hitting the blue button, or is he going to be hitting the red button? Red button. Why? Easier, which means conservation of energy. Both paths are pleasure-seeking, but one of them conserves energy, so he's going to hit the magic button as soon as he figures out how those buttons work. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to put him back in the cage, except this time the blue button is going to be the button where the trap door for the little lady is going to come, that she can come in there. That's that button. But the red button is going to be the magic button. What we're going to do is we're going to take a glass pipe, and we're going to drive it right down into his head, into the area of the brain that creates the flooding of dopamine. And we're going to put a chemical in that glass pipe called cocaine. And what cocaine is going to do is it will cause dopamine to be flooded, because that's exactly how cocaine works. So now every time he hits the red button, he's going to get an intense pleasure hit. Now what's he going to do? Which button is he going to hit? You guys know this. You've heard about these things, and you know what happens. That you've heard that after a few days, this creature will not eat, not sleep, not drink water. He's just going to be hitting that cocaine button over and over and over and over and over again because it's magic. And what's going to happen is after about 10 to 12 days, he'll die. That's what will happen to a typical lab animal if you put them in this paradigm. And we've known about that for a while, and it's interesting and fascinating. But what I like to do is to pause and say, I want us to picture if we could talk to him. What is the subjective view of that creature inside of that paradigm? And what he would be telling us is, I think I'm being really, really biologically successful. I think I'm being really successful. That's why I keep hitting this button, because it feels good, and feels good is the signal of my design telling me I'm absolutely doing the right thing. So don't tell me I'm not doing the right thing. I am doing the right thing. Okay? We don't trap lab animals like this very often. We do it only to learn things. But people have now figured out a lot of magical ways to trap each other, to do exactly this. And this is what I call the pleasure trap. It's when the pleasure mechanisms have been subverted. They've been hijacked. Because people figured out tricks to how to activate these mechanisms, and now creatures get themselves into very serious trouble, and those creatures are us. We had a young man that came of age just the right time in the world history, in the 1950s. He's young, handsome, talented, could sing, looked good for the camera. And by his early 20s, he was the king. It was Elvis Presley. And Elvis could have anything he wanted. So pretty soon his life became just hitting the magic buttons over and over and over again. We know what Elvis looked like in his latest years, in his 30s. Remember what happened? Overweight, out of shape, gasping for breath. Pills to get up in the morning, pills to get through the day, pills to go to sleep at night. If you really think about it, Elvis Presley was unbelievably unfortunate. He was unfortunate because he had access to all the magic buttons in the world. And what happened is he lost his internal compass and he lost his way. And later in life, he knew he was lost, and he turned to spirituality. He turned to anywhere he could try to get help for this, but he couldn't find it because his internal compass was spun by the modern temptations that I call the pleasure trap, that are subverting our natural design in a way that causes us to get lost. We all know about drug addiction. Everybody knows, everybody's experienced somewhere in their family or friends how hard that problem is. As a psychologist, there's no more heartbreaking problem that I work with and no more heartwarming process than when I can give somebody a helping hand and pull them out of that trap. That's the most intense pleasure trap that there is. But the most widespread pleasure trap that there is doesn't come from the hard drugs or alcohol, it comes from food. Food is the modern pleasure trap. It affects more people with more problems. Here's some of these other doctors have stuff. I'm not going to really talk about this. You guys all know this stuff, but I just wanted to show you that I can have grafts too. Yeah, there's another one of them, okay? So, yeah, yeah, there you go. So, the foods that people love, what are some of them? Cake, cheese, well, we'll start there. Number one food craving in the world. What's in chocolate that people really like? Fat and sugar, okay? What's in hot dogs that people like? Fat and salt, okay? What's in cheese that people like? Fat and salt, okay? What's in French fries that people like? Fat and salt. What is a French fry? It's a little bit of potato. We put it down in high reheated, rancid, carcinogenic oil, soak it up like that, like a sponge, salt it on the way up. I mean, it's a little healthier than if you stuck the straw straight in the deep fryer. Not much. Okay? Chips, that's just a French fry cold, cut a different way. Okay? What we're going to see is sugar, fat, and salt all the way through this, which kind of makes you think, well, now, wait a second. It's almost like this creature was designed by nature to eat sugar, fat, and salt, which is exactly what it was designed to seek. You're designed to seek sugar, fat, and salt in small concentrations in whole natural food. Those chemicals cause pleasure, dopamine, to be activated in the brain. It's to tell you, oh, you just did the right thing. You just ate something with sugar, fat, and salt in it. That other thing that you put in your mouth, the pine cone, that didn't have sugar, fat, and salt in it. The apple, that did. But it's coming with a package of fiber, water, vitamins, minerals, etc., that was exactly to fit your design. But what we've done is we've figured out what those pleasure-activating chemicals were, the little cues that were in there, and then what we did was we got rid of everything else and just eat the cue. When you eat the cue, you get everything out of balance, and when you get things out of balance, the integrity of the body breaks down, and then we get what we call disease. Okay? So that's our problem. Ice cream, invented in Paris in 1677, to rave reviews for the next 300 years, of course. Why? These are super concentrated sugar, fat, and salt. That's what it is. This is what I call the dietary pleasure trap. And it works like this. You have 5 time periods here that go across this axis. And here, this is going to be, if the dopamine system goes up here, that means it's really active, like, wow, that's really great, okay? This is down the normal zone. That's where we're supposed to be. And down here, that's subnormal. That's like not very good. So on a whole natural foods diet, our relationship to food is in here. It's in the normal range. And there's going to be 2 primary factors that are going to determine how high or how low in that range a bite of food is going to be. And the first thing is going to be how much energy is in the food. The more energy that's in the food, the more calories in the food per bite, the more pleasure that the system's going to tell us, because it's here to design to tell us, how valuable these things are for survival. So it's going to turn out that an apple is going to taste better than romaine lettuce, because romaine lettuce is about 100 calories a pound, and an apple is about 300 calories a pound. So that 3-to-1 concentration you can taste. Okay? It's going to turn out that as you go to different foods, if you go up into whole grains and beans and things like that, those are about 500 or 600 calories a pound. Oatmeal, oats. As we move up into nuts and seeds, those are even more concentrated. But what we're going to find is that as we artificially concentrate the food and we take apart an apple, and instead what we do is we squeeze all the water out of it and get rid of all the fiber and then just let it all dry out there and we get apple sugar. That sugar is not 300 calories a pound, it's 1,800 calories a pound. 6 to 1. Okay, so now what happens is when you hit that 6 to 1 on the tongue, you're getting a much exaggerated pleasure response than you were designed to get, and that is the result. Okay, so when we hyperconcentrate any of these things, whether it's fat, sugar, salt, this is going to be the result. Okay, so modern diet now, super high concentrated in all these things. Why? Because we've gotten rid of all the fiber and the water and the vitamins and minerals from the whole food. And we get to eat the signal, and that's what happens. And what do we think the subjective feeling is of the creature that does that? Oh, I'm doing this right. This is the right thing to do. This is going to increase my likelihood of survival. That's the internal message in the system. It's exactly what that thing is going to think. That's why if you put bread and chocolate in a rat cage, that's what the rats will eat. Right next to their natural chow that's natural for them, forget it. They're going to go right for the rat chow, the new rat, i.e. They're going to go for the concentrated food. And what will happen is that the average rat will have gained 49% of its body weight in 60 days. What do you think if I go around the country with a clipboard and a scale, and I find out that people are about 49% over their natural body weight? Because they're eating as much of that stuff as they want, because it's signaling to them that they're doing the right thing. And you might say, well, gee, you know what? That's a pretty neat place to live. I'd really like to live there. I like that. Oh, you're going to tell me that I'm going to get some diabetes later? Well, I'm only 35. What do I care? I'm going to let the good times roll. That seems like that's the right thing to do. And you know what? If that were true, if you got to live there, then I would say, you got a point. That's a rational debate. So if they cut my foot off later, what do I care? If I'd have a lousy last 10 years, oh well, I had a glorious first 60 years. But the thing is, you know, and I'm not moralistic about this. I'm not anybody's mother, and I'm not tut-tutting anybody. I just want you to have informed consent. I want you to know the truth so that you can make good decisions for yourself and your family. And it turns out that we don't get to live there. Because this is a signaling device that tells you, oh, we went from this concentration of the food and then we hyper-concentrated it, and the brain has to say, oh my God, that's fantastic. Eat the more concentrated stuff. But as you're eating the concentrated stuff, what happens then is the brain says, well, I don't need to keep signaling it like this so aggressively. I can now start signaling it down in here. This is what you call getting used to it. Neuroscientists call it neuroadaptation. Psychologists call it habituation. The truth is, we just call it get used to it. So what happens to you when you go to somebody's house at Christmas time? And you walk in and you smell the Christmas tree. So the concentration of that chemical is in the air, and you're like, wow, that smells great. I love the smell of Christmas tree. But how long does it last? 15 minutes? That's what's going to happen. You go into a movie theater in the daytime, you walk in, it seems dark. Okay? So then you watch the movie, and then you go outside later in the daytime, and what's it seem like now? Bright. Oh my gosh, it's bright out here. Well, what do you think happened? The light didn't get brighter. Your nervous system changed. Changes according to what you've been doing lately. So if you've been eating healthy food lately, and then you eat junk food, it's going to say, wow, that's fantastic. That is the right move. There's a lot of energy in there. That's exactly what it's going to do. Okay? And then what's going to happen is as you keep doing that, it's going to say, oh, well, now we're used to it. It's not dark in the movie theater after you've been in there a little while. No, we got used to it. Okay? So we're going to go up and down. You know what? I've never liked this chart. Somebody else made this chart. Hold on a second. There's one. There's my chart. Okay. So here's phase one, whole natural food. We're in the normal ranges. There's two things that matter where we are in that range. Number one, the concentration of the food, and number two, how long it's been since you've eaten. The longer you go without eating, you go 6 or 8 hours without eating, you're starting to get hungrier, the food is going to taste better. That's just how it's going to work, because the longer you go without food, the survival of the value of the food is increasing with every hour that passes. And so the beauty of your design starts signaling that to you, and that the food is going to taste better. That's why after you've eaten a large meal and you're full, there's only one thing you're interested in putting in there. Something that's super normal, that's going to bang those dopamine circuits so hard, the only thing that goes in there is dessert. See what I'm saying? People don't say, gee, you know what? Now that I've eaten everything else, I just feel like a couple more of those raw carrots. I don't know why, I just feel like it. Never happens. Okay? So what's going to happen now is we're going to introduce junk, and everything's going to go crazy. Every circuit in that brain is going to say, that's the right thing to do. Got it. And now what's going to happen is, once the person lives there for a little while, that's what's going to happen. They're going to come right down here into what I call phase 3, to where they're bouncing around phase 3, except they're doing what? They're eating junk. And look at how much pleasure they're getting from their food. They're getting exactly the same amount of pleasure from their food as they used to get from their food, except now they're eating junk instead of whole natural food. Now we're in trouble. Now what's going to happen next? Right now, you might get sick. Or you might hear a radio program. Or you might have a friend tells you about a pioneer, like Dr. Baxter Montgomery. And you might say, there's a better way. I'm in trouble. The doctor says I'm pre-diabetic or almost diabetic, or I am diabetic, but this other doctor has a new vision. And I listen to him. It's all making sense. So what I need to do is I need to eat a whole natural foods diet. So then I'm going to do that, and what's going to happen? That's what's going to happen. That's what's going to happen. We go from a concentrated stimulus to an unconcentrated stimulus like natural food, and what's going to happen is this whole system is going to signal like, wait, what happened to all those calories? Wait, okay? It's going to be subnormal. But remember what happened over here when we ate the junk, when we were here doing things right? Felt great. So now we have the answer to the question that we started with. That if you were lucky enough, smart enough, motivated enough, and you had heard the message, once you know the right way to go, why is it so hard to go there? The answer is because when you do the wrong thing, it feels right, and when you do the right thing, it feels wrong. That's why. Your entire motivational circuitry is spun 180 degrees on this problem. This is not a problem in nature. This is a problem of man. Man did this to ourselves. And we're in a trap. And we can't stop it because it's not going away. But only through the insight of understanding this, you can start to work your way out of this. And there's a few little tools that I like to pass along to people to help them, because you're probably going to visit this trap maybe a few times in your lifetime. Not too often do people just get out and then stay out. Sometimes they do. But this is a process, and it's a learning process, and we're going to have some slips, and we're going to be enticed, and we're going to need to know about how this trap works. This is how it works. That when we go to healthy food, we can expect to go through, this is what we call in drug addiction a withdrawal. That we're in withdrawal here, okay? Here is the introduction of the drug, and we get all the excitement. Then this is the tolerance stage to the drug, where pretty soon it's not working. In other words, we keep drinking or we keep using, and it turns out it's not even giving us much of a hit. Then finally, in crisis, or a person gets wise, they say, you know what, I have to go abstinent. I need to get clean. And if they do, that's what happens. Now they're in trouble. You know, this is hard sledding right here. Then what happens is, if they continue on, they recover. That's what recovery is. So the recovery for the taste buds in humans is several weeks. That's what it is. Now you might say, wow, I'm going to have to sled through that for several weeks. And I have to tell you, yep. All you guys out there, when I looked at Dr. Mason's thing, I'm like, believe me, I don't want anything gadgetry. I don't want any of those solutions. Okay, all right, I got it, okay? So is it worth it? It's overwhelmingly worth it. So is there a price to be paid? You bet there's a price to be paid. Here's the price. You need to know that the price is temporary. Thank goodness the price is temporary. But is there a price? Don't let anybody fool you. There's a price. If you have people like our chefs and like the doc that are working on these things and looking at novel ways to put food together, it can be pretty good. It can be very good, okay? But can it be as good as Haagen-Dazs or Ben & Jerry's? No, it can't. It's not their fault. I like to say, good food should taste like this, like, I really like that. That's good. If it tastes like this, we know what that is. Okay? Shouldn't taste like that. Right? All right. The beauty of it is you'll come out of the trap. And once you're out of the trap, you're back at the beginning. And you're back at the beginning. How do we get there? What are a few little ideas to help us? The most important idea is you know the trap's there. It's time limited. This is something that you have to earn. You can earn your way out of this with diligence. Okay? A few weeks. There's a few tricks here. Starve yourself. All right? Remember, the longer you go without food, the more pleasure it has in it. Some of my people will just do a fast, a water fast for 24 hours. Particularly, it starts on a Saturday night late when they've cleaned every tofutti cutie out of the icebox, okay? All right, they're gone. They're no longer calling your name in the middle of the night. They're gone, okay? So that might be a good time to go all the way to Sunday night before you eat. Wake up Sunday morning, don't eat anything. Go through the afternoon, just go ahead and suffer a little bit, all right? By Sunday night, a healthy natural foods dinner is going to taste better than it's tasted in a while. That's a way to help boost you out of the trap or to reset your palate just a little bit. Second way is to use juice for maybe 2 or 3 days in a row, just juice. And the reason is when we do that, we're using materials where there's really no fat in it and there's really no sodium at all. So as a result of that, what's going to happen is the fat receptors and the salt receptors get a complete break. And as a result, when they go very, very quiet for a while, then when you reintroduce foods that has a little bit of those in there at a natural level, it tastes better. So this is exactly what would happen if we said, okay, this is enough light in the room, this is not bad, but what if we turned the lights down for a while? If we just turned the lights down for a little while, for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we brought this amount of light back, it would seem brighter. And that's exactly what we can do with using juice for a couple days. Another thing is that you can go to jail. My friend and my co-author of The Pleasure Trap, Dr. Alan Goldhammer, runs a jail. Runs a food jail where you go there, and in jail they give you bread and water, but at Goldhammer's place they just give you water. That's it. So what people do is he specializes in water fasting, he and his doctors there. And so what people will do is they'll come there and maybe fast for a week or 2 or 3, and depending upon what their circumstances are. And what I can tell you is something remarkable will happen to people. And that is that if they haven't eaten any food for a week, then whole natural food tastes great. Now, that is very interesting. We'll have people that will come in that will swear that they do not and cannot like natural food, that they can't do it, that they just don't think it's possible for them, that they've heard that they need to do this, they've gotten the message, and they've struggled on their own, but they can't do it. But it turns out that guess what? Surprise, surprise, after 4 days on water, suddenly they're dreaming about carrots. Okay? Turns out that I had this argument with my sister when I was trying to help my late father many years ago. And she said, Doug, you and your friends, you're just kind of crazy that people just won't eat this way and they can't like this food. And I said, Marguerite, all due respect, she's my older sister. She could always beat me up. By the time I thought I might be able to take her, it was too late. So I never got any satisfaction there. But I said, Do you really think that you were designed in such a way as to dislike the healthiest food for you? Do you really think that would be possible, that you could be designed in that way? It's not possible. We're designed to really enjoy healthy food. And if we are not really enjoying healthy food, it's not the fault of the design. It's the fact that we have disturbed the entire system. So, you can enjoy really healthy food. If you're not, there's a few options, a few little tricks, and the most important thing you need to know is that if you stay the course through the process of readjusting your palate and get some tools and bring some new ideas home, if you start to institute this, you will start to have success. It will work. This is the right direction. And if you continue on this path, you will absolutely have the life you deserve. Thank you very much, Bob.